Okay, let's look at equations with fractions. Now, if that word fractions makes you freak out a little bit like this guy over here, then don't worry about it because we're going to see if we can help you today. Now, most people know that to solve an equation with a fraction is two basic steps. You're finding a common denominator and then you're dropping that denominator. The reason this works is that if you have two fractions with the same denominator, then the numerator must also be the same. Or you can times by the denominator to get the same numerator, either way. But I find that most people actually don't struggle with the basic steps. They struggle with how to find the denominator. So let's have a look at that. Now, if you have two numbers, then you're just looking at the multiples of those numbers, and you find the common multiple, and that will be your denominator, or you could times the two different numbers together. Now with x's, the multiples would be x, x squared, x cubed, x4, and so on. And it would be the same with another letter like y, y squared, y cubed. And so your common denominator, you could just times the two different numbers, the x and the y, together. But if you had a squared, the multiples would start from the squared. And so that squared would have to be used in your LCD. So the denominator LCD between x and x squared would have to be x squared. Now, two different numbers like x plus 1 and x minus 3 work exactly the same way. You can just times them together. But again, if you have the squared, then make sure that you're using the squared in your LCD. So the summary is you must use at least one of each different number or different part factor in your LCD. And of course, if there's a squared or a power of 3, you must use that power as well. So let's have a look now at an example. And here's an example, but as you can see, the denominators are not in their factors or in their parts. So first thing you always want to do is just factorize them. I also like to put brackets around them so that I can see those individual factors. Also notice in this example that we've got an x minus 3 and then a 3 minus x. Now those are not the same number, but they're very close, and all they require would be a switch around. So remember, a switch around is when you put a negative in the front or change the sign and then you can swap it around. I will do a little video on that sometime as well if you're struggling. Okay, so now to find the common denominator, you need to use the x minus 3 and the x plus 1 because they're the different numbers. So let's put them all over that. And what I like to do is ask myself what is missing. So from the first term, there's nothing missing from the denominator. And so the first term stays as is. But in the second term, there's an x minus 3 missing. That needs to be given. And the last term, an x plus 1. Once you've done that, you can drop that denominator and solve it like a quadratic equation. If you struggle with quadratic equations, have a look at my quadratic equations video. You're going to get two answers, minus 2 and minus 1. And please bear in mind that for fractions, you need to check your answer because that minus 1 over there would make the denominator 0, which is not okay. So just cross it out. Okay, let's have a look. What are the final things to remember? Well, remember to get your common denominator. How do you get your common denominator? The summary is use at least one of each part or factor that's different in the denominators, including the squares. Don't forget switch arounds. Ask yourself, what is missing? Don't forget to factorize. Okay, so slow this video down, pause where you need, and then I hope you're going to feel just like this guy does, much better about fractions.